always aspired to be, warm and welcoming to everyone, but we recognized that there was still work to do. So in May, when Force of Nature rolled out, we did it specifically, we committed ourselves to educating, inspiring, and celebrating women in the outdoors, and while doing so, we were sharing their stories. All right, we have a very super extra special guest with us tonight. She is our keynote speaker of the evening, and so this amazing keynote speaker, also known as Force of Nature, she is an award-winning writer, a photographer, and has expertise in seriously everything outdoors. She is an amazing, amazing person. She's also the outdoor travel editor for Panorama, Journal of Intelligent Travel. She's well known for her love of extreme sports, adventure travel, and exploration with her young children. So join me in giving the warmest welcome ever to Leslie Hsu Oh.
No matter where I've moved or traveled, I always find my bearings at a REI store. This is my community and my family, so I am absolutely thrilled to be celebrating women in the outdoors with you all tonight. I'm going to read something from a work in progress and also read something that's published so you can get a flavor of the kind of themes that I like to write about. And then I'll talk about how and why I take my kids on some crazy adventures in the outdoors. And finally, at the end, I will raffle off some of the gear that my family and I love to test. So, and there's some yummy marshmallows that we'll have a lot of extras over here, so please come and visit with us after the talk. Oh, finally, I forgot to mention that I am also raffling off a personal gift. It's some greeting cards that my mother, who has passed away at this point, but she was a fabulous ink drawer, and she did these greeting cards of wildlife. Okay, so I'm going to start with a story that I'm working on currently with Outside Magazine. Has anyone done the Chilkoot Trail? It crosses between Alaska to Canada, and this is the famous picture of the gold rush stampeders that, carried 1,000 tons of gear over this pass. Nobody? Oh my gosh. I hope you guys do it after you hear my story. Okay, so if you see the map on the right, there's it's a 33-mile hike, and it takes people like 4 or 5 days to do it. So the story begins at the red circle part, which is the pass. That's the part that crosses between Alaska to Canada, and it's called The Couple in Trouble. As midnight approached, mist descended on the narrow Chilkoot Pass that cuts through the Alaska Coast Range. It swallowed up the mountains, then worked its way down the steep sides of the pass, strewn with granite boulders that had once partied with decadent glaciers. It took from my sight even my husband, whose boots occasionally sent down bits of ice and scree on my head. We had not spoken to each other for miles. Labored breath, the only beat against the creak of our rain and sweat-soaked packs. The tension between us, wound tight by a question, snarled between curse words by my husband yesterday when he got injured near the start of the Chilkoot Trail. So this is how you wanted to celebrate our 10-year anniversary? I said nothing then, just as I said nothing now, though I was in desperate need of a water break. Light-headed, fingertips raw and numb from pulling my body weight in a pack that weighed as much as our 7-year-old and 4-year-old up a 45-degree vertical rock scramble. In my head, I repeated a mantra: murder, suicide, disease, malnutrition, hypothermia, avalanche, and heartbreak. These are the hardships 30,000 gold rushers survived or lost their life to along this trail in 1897 and 1898. Reading about these hardships and seeing both boot soles, canvas boats, tin cans litter along the trail only made me more certain that this was exactly how I wanted to celebrate 10 years with this band. How could Thomas not see that I wanted solidarity? That yes, our life journey together might be fraught with struggle, but wouldn't we, like Walter Curtin, who did not make a cent during the Klondike Gold Rush, and witnessed men going mad on this trail, also turn the clock back and do it all over again? Perspective that, hey, at least we would never live through anything as awful, or perhaps return to those precious days before kids, with oodles of time to wade into glacier-fed rivers and cast a line, to lose ourselves in the wilderness while we fell in love. But mostly, I hope that we would find what Stanley H. Pierce wrote to his mother on August 9th, 1897. Last night, while looking up at the stars, rolled snugly up in my sleeping bag, I saw the grand northern lights shooting up from a semicircle above the mountain and looking exactly like huge searchlights, shifting and cutting into space. It made me feel that now we were nearer the presence of our Maker than I had ever been before, and I felt how small and trivial our small troubles and pleasures had been. In our case, the more miles we hiked, the more our troubles threatened to tear us apart. First, we had been at odds ever since he made me choose Alaska or my marriage. The year before, while everyone worried that my spirit would die if I was uprooted from the only place I've ever felt at home, he sold our log cabin in the mountains nestled along the Eagle River and moved us to a major East Coast city. Second, we nearly had to cancel our hike because we couldn't find anyone willing to watch our kids without suggesting that we had our priorities wrong. And third, because he resented me for being tempted to choose Alaska over him, and I resented him for giving me an ultimatum. We didn't train together or coordinate our gear. As I reached the gas engine winch, an important example of gas engine technology used to haul gear up the pass, I collapsed. Not so much from the physical pain, but rather the emotional. The mist pressed in until I couldn't see the winch. It claimed the patches of snow, the moss, the lichens on the rock, until at last I felt like I was the only person in the world. Fear or delight crept into my consciousness. In that moment of confusion, Thomas materialized out of the mist, chiseled and perfect like Captain America. He grabbed the pack I was carrying, the same one that injured him yesterday, and disappeared before I could tell him that he was right. I was not having fun either. When I found the strength to continue towards the summit, I realized that Thomas, despite injuring his back the day before and nursing several water blisters on his swollen feet, had been hiking one pack up at a time. An old men's North Face pack from my backpacking days in Europe, which did not fit him, and a Granite Gear award-winning pack which he spoiled me with on my birthday. Before I could understand the significance of both of our sacrifices, I heard, "Are you okay?" Two hikers appeared like a mirage. "Yeah, are we close to the summit?" Thomas hollered. "Yes," the woman answered. "Where are you guys heading?" I asked, happy that we weren't the only fools who had underestimated the difficulty of this 33-mile hike. The man chuckled. "We are Parks Canada wardens out looking for you." We had all the right gear. We were younger than most of the hikers we've seen so far on the trail, and we were experienced long-distance backpackers. This was so embarrassing. The male warden hiked in front of us while the female warden took up the rear. They explained that tonight they had set us up in the emergency shelter at the summit with 2 thermoses of hot water. Before I could protest that we totally could handle the additional 4 miles required to reach Happy Camp, where the rest of the hikers had already turned in for the night, I read the sign on the shelter. "Rest briefly, then move on. Leave backpacks outside." Next to that, a warning that we had to pass through the Stone Crib Avalanche Pass, the most hazardous area during the hiking season. We shed our white jackets and packs on the warm benches, thanked the wardens, and shut the door on the flurry of wind, rain, and mist outside. It would be the only night on this trail that we stayed dry. The only moment in our marriage so far where we truly shut out our troubles and realized that when all the resentments, responsibilities, and stress of raising a family together are stripped away, when you've bared it all out on the trail, there wasn't a crack in our foundation of love. Thomas pampered me that night. The best cup of hot cocoa I've ever tasted, my favorite Mountain House beef stroganoff, a massage, duct tape on my blisters, a flask of rum, and the finale, dark chocolate cheesecake. He joked about how I like to make his life difficult. That it was my evil plan to cripple him, my ultimate revenge for making me leave Alaska. We laughed and laughed the way we had forgotten how to. In the morning, as much as I wanted to bury my face in his chest and hide from the world, I also could not wait to experience the elevation of 3,500 feet on my own. I crept out of my sleeping bag and slipped outside just as the sun rose. What a privilege to wake up to this scene few can experience due to the mysterious weather that typically shrouded everything in mystery. Mountain after mountain, marbled with snow or glaciers. Crater Lake so still it mirrored the sky above, a soothing shade of blue with light-hearted clouds adrift. With the happy babble of a stream winding past my feet, I felt what Pierce described. In the same letter, Pierce wrote that the Chilkoot Trail will make a man of me, and should I ever get through this trip, I shall be able to undertake anything in the world. It would be another 2 days, another 16.5 miles, where the wilderness sorted out our affairs. We talked about how we polarized over the years. He preferred to retire on a beach, the bustle of his city, somewhere warm. I wanted Alaska, the cold, remote places. By then, we had seen the historical photos in Lindeman, the single file line of determined men hiking up the golden stairs multiple times, the women in long skirts, petticoats, and corsets carrying babies on the trail. We shared meals with couples who had figured out how to live with their differences. Sometimes they completed these long-distance hikes with their siblings or friends rather than their spouse. One old man confessed that he had faked an injury at the start of the trail and hoped a bottle of champagne at the finish line would butter up his fuming wife. We earned our certificate and will later hang it on our wall as a symbol of the perseverance of the human spirit. At the Bennett train station, where hikers celebrated surviving the trip with beef stew, we bonded with our fellow comrades and learned that the wardens had asked every person who summited that day whether they had seen the couple in trouble. When Thomas finally woke that morning on the summit and joined me on the edge of a cliff overlooking Crater Lake, I asked for his forgiveness. "What do I need to forgive you for?" Thomas asked. I did not expect that answer. I thought you've been mad at me for not wanting to leave Alaska? It was the first time in our marriage that we hadn't agreed on a big ticket item. Thomas shrugged. "You're here, right?" "Yes, I'm right here." Okay, I opened with this essay because from what I've experienced, women, especially wives and moms, I feel like they're the ones that always have to plan the vacations for the family and, the trips, the healthy outdoor activities for the family. And so we're dealing with a lot of different personalities, different ages, and also different abilities. So my mom was a photographer and a journalist, and she handled this by taking us to all the national parks in the United States and Canada. She would walk into the visitor center and ask the first ranger that she saw, "What's the most dangerous thing we can do in your park?" So it was brilliant because we thought she was like badass. And we thought we were doing the most dangerous thing in the park and no one else, was privileged to do so. But meanwhile, if you think about it, she cleverly built in a safety measure because I don't think the ranger would recommend anything that wasn't really safe for us or safe for our age group. All right, so now I'm trying to do the same thing with my husband. As you heard in the essay, is very different from me. And my 4 kids, and they're all over here, probably making the most noise in the audience. And they span the ages of, so I've got she just turned 1, and I've got a 4-year-old, and a 9-year-old, and a 12-year-old. So nowadays, since I don't think it would work so well if I walked into an establishment and asked them what's the most dangerous thing I can do. Instead, I work with tour operators. And in this case, we just went to Iceland in June. We decided to be brave enough and take 4 kids abroad. And we wanted to visit the 3 national parks in Iceland. So this was the only tour operator that was willing to take my 10-month, she was 10 months old at the time. And he just told me to show up, and I didn't even know like who was gonna ride with who. And he told me just to climb on the snowmobile behind him, and I basically held my 10-month-old like against my chest. And then my daughter, I think Riley had the most difficult time. She was the 4-year-old, because she like walked up and she thought she was going to be riding with me, and they're like, no, you're going to be riding on another snow machine with like another guide. So she kind of had like tears pooling in her eyes. She wasn't sure she liked that, but she got on, and then my oldest daughter rode with another guide, and then my son rode with my husband. And it was so foggy, you couldn't see a thing. And I remember when we got to the first stop, all I could hear was my 4-year-old screaming, "Mommy, I did it! I snow machined!" And this is a national park. I can't pronounce the name, so I put the name in the slide. But it is the largest ice cap in Europe. And underneath all that ice is actually like a dozen volcanoes and a lava field. It's kind of cool. So before I tell you how I put together an Iceland adventure that would satisfy all of us, let me explain why I take kids on adventures like this. So I've got a story coming out in Conde Nast Traveler soon that is titled "Why Kids Should Be Taken on Adventures." So here are some of the highlights from that story. So does anyone know where most people get injured? The kitchen. Okay, anything else? Anybody? Where do you think people most get injured? Cars, I heard cars. That's a good guess. Yes, right outside their front door. So there's a study by Dr. Barbara Haas. She's a trauma surgeon, and she discovered that most people get injured less than 10 miles away from their home. Okay, so I got another question. For Americans who travel abroad, what do you think is the main cause of death? Traffic accidents? That's a very good guess. Anybody else? Heart attack. Very good. So yes, 74 to 80% of deaths are from natural causes, and then 18 to 24% are from injuries, and the most common injury is road traffic. So the first lesson for me was to try to create me and you time, and this is a quote that I'm taking from my 4-year-old, because that's what she calls it. So this was me and you time with my husband. So it was really difficult actually to find childcare, but when we did, it was really worth it, because we were able to drive 2 hours out of the city to this really remote area of Iceland and go fly fishing. And the thing that I loved about it was that we didn't run into a single soul that day. And I guess this company, Fish Partner, they have certain rights to different fishing areas, and so nobody else can fish there. Yeah, it was pretty cool. And so here we are fishing at the base of a waterfall, and I don't know if you can see my husband, but he's like right up at the bottom of the falls, and he said it was so hard to see that the water was just like splashing up in his eyes. So, and I was a little bit farther out, but I kind of wish I had his spot because it looked really cool. The other thing I liked about it was, well, obviously the peace and quiet, but we also drove across a lot of rivers, and I thought that was like we were on, these are our lava fields, and these are packed horse trails that we were driving on. So that felt, I don't know, metaphorically, like we were crossing a lot of rivers to be able to spend, that we were celebrating our 15th anniversary. So the other thing that, this is a moment that I really loved, where we went glacier kayaking, and I got to have me and you time with my son. So he's in front of me there in that kayak, and then my husband was with my oldest. And as you can see, there's nobody around us because we were so slow that everybody was like ahead of us. And part of the problem was that my son decided that he was too tired to paddle. So he wanted mommy to do all the work, and I was like, well, we're a team, so if you're not paddling, I'm not paddling either. So this was a great moment for us because, you know, he was really frustrated, and then we were suddenly like out on this beautiful place with these huge icebergs all around us, and it was just the two of us. And so we started talking, and that was nice. We talked about things that, you know, he wouldn't normally talk about with his father, and it was a really bonding moment. And at one point, finally, we heard a scream, and my oldest is gonna come up and talk about what that scream was about. But that's kind of what, suddenly he just picked up the paddle and he started paddling. And so I think that was a great moment for him to realize, like, you know, we're not gonna get anywhere if you don't work together. So I interviewed all my children, and you're gonna hear from the girls in a minute, but I asked them what was like their favorite moment of Iceland. My son actually said it was horseback riding. So this was the first time that he ever rode a horse, so that was exciting. But he said that he really enjoyed talking to his horse. And I think that what made this memorable was the fact that once they put all of us on a horse, so my husband was on a horse, I was on a horse, and then my oldest and Ethan, like, there was no way I could help him. And I could hear both Kira and Ethan like yelling for me, like, Mom, help me. And like, the minute I got on my horse, she just took off. And my husband too, his horse took off. So there was no way we could help our kids. And I think that, like, normally I would just step in and help him, but both of them were like, help. And then we just heard their voice like this. And we didn't see them till the end of the entire tour. So they were really on their own. They had to figure out what to do. And so I think that was really an empowering moment. Okay, Kira, are you ready? So Kira's my oldest. She's 12. Do you want to talk about what you learned from our adventures in Iceland?
Well, I learned that having the right gear is important because that scream was a couple. They flipped a kayak because they were goofing off. And in the end, they were all dry because they had the right gear. They had a water suit, waterproof socks, a dry suit, gloves, and rain boots. So the kayak tour guide found a ice cave, and we were allowed to go in one at a time. So the ice cave had like a crack in the top, and like water, like raindrops, or like the ice cave was like melting, so like water came through the top. I have a GoPro, and I'm so mad that I forgot to like check it before we went on 2 adventures. One is like the kayaking, and the other is the snowmobiling. My GoPro was dead, and I didn't have time to charge it before we went on the adventures.
Yeah, so she learned a lot about how to prepare prepare your gear, and check it. So she actually, the snowmobile was the day before the kayak, and she checked, the first day she forgot to charge her GoPro. She was so pissed. The second day she did charge it, but for some reason, I think the plug turns off when you turn the lights off at the hotel, so it didn't charge. Yeah. So that's what she learned, a big lesson about making sure your equipment's working. So the other thing that they learned was just how important it was to research and prepare for the trip. So one of the best things that we did was rent from Sixt, and they have a GPS that you can rent as well as a hotspot, and I swear that saved us. There was one occasion where we had to take my son to an emergency doctor, and we had that hotspot that could guide us and tell us where to go. From my personal experience raising 4 kids, I have seen that adventure travel really builds character. The last thing I'm going to read is something from Alpinist magazine, and this really shows how the kids learned about that the mind is our biggest limiting factor. We've also had opportunities, especially in bad weather, to teach the kids how you can't control out of control things. And one of the things that they are always frustrated about is that their friends, like the minute it rains, their friends just like run inside the house. So I don't know if you guys saw, maybe in June and July, both of these issues were in your REI store. And fortunately, I had a story in both of these magazines that month. So this was like, I think, June. So the one in Backpacker, this one was about taking my oldest, who was 5 at the time, and my son, who was 2. We took them hiking on a glacier, and I found a tour operator who was very innovative, and she figured out how to put these step-on crampons. Like, they're adult step-on crampons, but they were able to fit the 2-year-old, and so we were able to hike on a glacier together. You know, it was a little bit scary when they first took off, especially my 2-year-old who just learned how to walk. But they did great. So I'm going to end with just reading a very short bit from the Alpinist story. And if you're interested in hearing the rest of the story, REI was nice enough to purchase several copies. I only have 10 copies, but if you'd like to have a copy of that story, please come and visit with me at this table. I'll be happy to give you one. This story was about taking the kids climbing, and we started I guess my baby was only like 6 months old when we took her, but Riley has climbed when she was 1. So, and it's an important story for me because it's going to be part of this memoir that I'm working on. So if you're interested in that memoir, it's kind of about how nature helps us make sense of this messy world. And so let me read really quickly from this. The context that I want to give you is that we were going on this hike with their snowboard coaches. The coaches eyed the rising river nervously as Kira and Ethan used EDRs to aid past the first 6 feet of blank schist to reach the start holes. Neither of them seemed to mind the temperature or the difficulty of the climb. So Joe is their snowboard coach. Joe said, "If you checked your harness, rope, carabiners, and your belay device, and you know your partner well, you should have no fear of hitting the ground. That's an irrational fear. We know all the systems are in place, and it's safe. So how would you apply that to snowboarding?" Then Kira says, "Being afraid at a competition to do a trick I've practiced all season?" "Yes," Joe said. "If you've done the trick a million times, you have no reason to be scared. On the flip side, if there's another athlete that's trying to pressure you into doing a trick you've never done before, that's irrational fear." As I packed away my camera and made my way toward the family, my daughter asked for another turn. By that time, the water the water had risen at that point like a foot. So we were a little bit worried. But without informing her belayer, Kira leaped onto the first meteor and missed. And because the rope wasn't yet taut, she fell waist deep into this freezing water. This was like December. And this is a secret climbing spot, by the way. Anyway, so she fell waist deep into the water, so cold and translucent that you could count the rocks beneath the surface. Before I could react, Joe pulled Kira out of the water and back onto the wall. Everyone extended a hand to bring her in, but she shook her head. Only one word did she utter between shivered gasps. Climbed. I realized that I forgot about my 4-year-old. Do you still want to say something? Okay, come on up. I forgot to ask her what she thought about Iceland. Okay. What was your favorite part of Iceland?
The waterfall.
Oh, yeah? Why? What else?
Hot tub.
Yeah, that was, I didn't prep her. This was what I kind of am surprised that she talked about the hot tub, but there was a hotel that we were staying in that had a hot tub inside the room. And so that was like the highlight of her trip, I guess. All right, thank you for inviting me tonight.